Today also was the first day of what are expected to be 3 days of testimony from the president's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, of course, has pled guilty to 9 felony charges, including lying to Congress and 2 campaign finance felonies, in which he and federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York told the federal judge overseeing Cohen's case that it wasn't just Cohen who committed those felonies. The president himself was also implicated in them. Today's first day of testimony from Michael Cohen was in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And although it happened behind closed doors, so we don't know directly what happened, CNN reports tonight that one of the things that happened in that closed-door testimony is that Michael Cohen apologized to members of the committee for having lied to them the last time he testified to them. Again, those lies he told to Congress are part of why Michael Cohen is about to report to federal prison in May. We're expecting him not only to apologize to that Senate Intelligence Committee today, but also to the House Intelligence Committee when he testifies to them behind closed doors on Thursday. Now, beyond his apology for his previous false testimony today, we know very little about what Michael Cohen said to the Senate Intelligence Committee today. Again, that testimony was given in closed session. That said, I think personally for me, it was a little unnerving to see Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, the vice chairman of the committee. He walked out toward the end of Cohen's testimony today, and he talked to reporters very briefly about how it had gone with Michael Cohen. For me, it was a little unnerving, a little unsettling that this is what Mark Warner had to say about what he heard today from Michael Cohen behind closed doors.
Quickly, Ed, we've still got a little bit more time to finish. And the only comment I'm going to make is that 2 years ago when this investigation started, I said it may be the most important thing I'm involved in my public life in the Senate. And nothing I've heard today dissuades me from that view.
Did the president commit any crimes, sir?
And then he took no further questions. Not long thereafter, Michael Cohen himself emerged from that closed-door hearing with Senate Intelligence Committee members. And of course, Cohen is not in a position to be able to elaborate to reporters what he talked about in that closed session. That's why it's a closed session. But he did thank everybody who was there staking out the hearing room, and he did further raise expectations for what's going to happen tomorrow when he testifies not behind closed doors, but in an open hearing that'll be televised starting at 10 a.m.
First of all, I want to thank you all for sticking around and waiting for me. At this point in time, I really appreciate the opportunity that was given to me to clear the record and to tell the truth. And I look forward to tomorrow, to being able to, in my voice, to tell the American people my story. And I'm going to let the American people decide exactly who's telling the truth. So I want to thank you all again for sticking around, and have a good night.
You can hear where the scrum of reporters starts shouting questions to Michael Cohen about his testimony, about what he's going to say tomorrow, about what he's going to say about the president. The anticipation for what Cohen is going to say in this open hearing tomorrow has been stoked all day today by multiple news agencies reporting that Cohen is basically bringing a dump truck with him to describe his years of dealings with President Trump and the Trump Organization. We're told that Cohen is prepared to testify on matters touching on everything from the president's personal behavior to the way the president has filed or not filed his taxes, to alleged criminal behavior by the president during the time he has been president. And on that last point, which I think is maybe more important than we are ready for heading into that testimony tomorrow, apparently Cohen is prepared to bring documents tomorrow to Congress that specifically relate to the campaign finance felonies for which Michael Cohen is about to go to prison. Now, the Wall Street Journal has put a finer point on this than anybody else tonight in their new reporting. And the new reporting in the Wall Street Journal tonight says that tomorrow Michael Cohen is going to give Congress a check made out to Mr. Cohen for the purpose of reimbursing him for the illegal hush money payments that Cohen made to benefit the Trump campaign, the illegal hush money payments related to Stormy Daniels, who had said that she had had a sexual encounter with President Trump. That hush money payment was apparently made to stop her from talking about that publicly before the election. Again, that is a campaign finance felony to which Michael Cohen has pled guilty and for which he is going to prison. citing a person familiar with Cohen's planned testimony. The Wall Street Journal reports tonight that, quote, in his testimony Wednesday, Cohen will provide documentation of his reimbursement for the $130,000 payment he made to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet about her alleged affair with the president ahead of the election. The Journal reports tonight that Cohen will show the Oversight Committee tomorrow a signed check. Quote, Mr. Trump signed some of the checks reimbursing Mr. Cohen, which Mr. Cohen began receiving after Mr. Trump took office. So again, that reporting tonight from the Wall Street Journal. And again, this hush money stuff is not like the Stormy Daniels story, right? This is not just a salacious story about the president and Ms. Daniels and whether or not the president allegedly had an affair or a sexual encounter with her, separate and apart from any salacious or sexual content of this story. The payoff element of this story makes this a criminal matter. Right? This is a felony to which Michael Cohen has already pled guilty and for which he is going to prison, and in which the president, in which prosecutors say the president is personally implicated. Right? Prosecutors have described the president as directing Michael Cohen to commit this felony. They have described that in court filings. They have described that through Michael Cohen's allocution in open court before a federal judge. If Michael Cohen is going to provide documentary evidence tomorrow to that effect, if Michael Cohen is going to give Congress evidence tomorrow that implicates the president in having committed financial crimes while he has been serving as president, what is Congress supposed to do with that? I mean, what is supposed to happen next after, hypothetically, the Congress tomorrow gets evidence of the president committing crimes in office? I mean, this is not a totally unprecedented situation. It's unprecedented in a lot of ways, but it at least has cousins, right? In the case of Vice President Spiro Agnew, federal prosecutors obtained rock-solid evidence that Vice President Agnew had taken envelopes full of cash bribes and kickbacks in his White House office while he was serving as vice president. Now, the way federal prosecutors responded to that evidence when it came to the vice president in 1972 and 1973 is that they prepared a 40-count indictment against Vice President Agnew. And then they let the Nixon-Agnew White House know that they had done that they had prepared that indictment. Agnew and his lawyers argued publicly that Agnew couldn't be indicted while he was in office, but nevertheless, they then entered into secret negotiations with the Justice Department that Agnew would agree to leave office. He would agree to resign as vice president in exchange for pleading to just one of the counts that they were preparing to charge him with. And because prosecutors in 1973 did not throw the book at Spiro Agnew, because they did not end up bringing that 40-count felony indictment against Vice President Agnew, because they let him resign instead of facing that indictment, so he only had to plead to one count. Because of that precedent, the Agnew case is controversial, but it is also the precedent here. And if this reporting tonight from the Wall Street Journal is correct, and if Michael Cohen is in fact about to hand over to an investigating congressional committee tomorrow evidence related to the president committing financial crimes, felonies, while in office, we are now getting to the point where that Agnew precedent sort of crashes into the current history we are living through with this current sitting president. So we're going to have the lead Wall Street Journal reporter on that story coming up here live in just a moment. I will say, though, because of everything that's being reported in advance of Michael Cohen's open testimony tomorrow, because of the anticipation of the kinds of documents that Cohen might be about to hand over, what he may be able to testify to in terms of the president's behavior, I do think it's reasonable to expect that the prospect of Michael Cohen's open testimony tomorrow may be causing some consternation at the Justice Department right now, right? I mean, this doesn't happen very often. But if clear evidence of the president's involvement in felonies since he's been serving as president, if clear evidence of that is made public tomorrow, I mean, the Justice Department has to be prepared tonight for how they're going to react or not to the public airing of that evidence. They're also presumably preparing for the possibility that this evidence may generate a formal criminal referral from Congress concerning the president's alleged crimes. They may refer this matter for prosecution to the Justice Department. Now, in terms of whether or not the president can be indicted and can be prosecuted for a crime, the somewhat shaky Justice Department internal policy on that issue is based in part on the Spiro Agnew precedent, on the Agnew-era Justice Department guidance, which said that a vice president could be indicted, but a president could not. And I describe that as somewhat shaky Justice Department policy, not only because of the evidence we've turned up, which suggests that people involved in the initial creation of that policy in the Agnew era, they never intended for that to be the last word on whether or not a president could be indicted. I mean, even if you ignore the historical origins of this Justice Department policy, which suggest it should have never led to any permanent policy that the president can't be indicted, even if you ignore that interesting history about the origins of that policy, you should also just look at what's going on with President Trump and that policy right now. I mean, if this Wall Street Journal report tonight is correct, and Michael Cohen is in fact going to hand over financial documentary evidence tomorrow of the president's involvement in that illegal campaign finance scheme, which Cohen has pled guilty to already. I mean, think about it. This is already a case where federal prosecutors right now are butting up against this idea that a president has nothing to fear from the criminal law. Right? This idea that a sitting president just can't get in trouble for any crimes he committed either before or during his presidency. I mean, on these specific issues, on this specific set of facts, about which Cohen is reportedly going to testify tomorrow and about which he is reportedly going to hand over incriminating documents tomorrow, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York have already told a federal judge that the president is personally implicated in the commission of these felony counts. Right? If there's such clarity in the Justice Department that a president has nothing to fear from the criminal law, how do you explain that? That federal prosecutors have already told a federal judge the president is implicated in those felonies. I mean, depending on what happens tomorrow and what evidence Michael Cohen makes public, potentially we are getting to the part of the plot here where we're going to learn if there are federal prosecutors who may try to challenge that internal Justice Department policy, which says you can't indict a president. If prosecutors don't intend to try to defy or challenge that policy directly, there's also the possibility, which is being increasingly discussed in legal circles, that prosecutors may try to interpret that current Justice Department policy in such a way that they wouldn't attempt to directly prosecute the president right now while he's still in office, but they might potentially bring a sealed indictment against the president, one that would only be unsealed once the president was no longer in office. Now, such a move would have two advantages from prosecutors' perspective. First, it would effectively stop the clock on any statute of limitations, on any crimes committed by the president, right? That would make it so the president couldn't use his de facto immunity from prosecution while he's serving in office to run out the clock on the statute of limitations for any of his crimes. So that's one benefit to the sealed indictment approach. Of course, the second major benefit to prosecutors, if they brought a potential sealed indictment against the president, is that that could set the stage for negotiations of the same kind that the Justice Department entered into with Spiro Agnew in 1973, right? Negotiations in which this office holder knows that he is up against serious felony charges, but he has this one great advantage in his plea negotiations with prosecutors, the great advantage that almost no other criminal defendant ever has, which is that this office holder, in this case it would be the president, could, like Agnew, offer to trade away his resignation, just like Agnew did, in exchange for prosecutors making some or all of those criminal charges go away. So again, I think what's about to happen might be a bigger deal than we are broadly grappling with. On the eve of this testimony from the president's longtime personal lawyer, with these reports that Michael Cohen is about to provide evidence in public and to Congress of the president committing criminal acts while in office, it's starting to look like we're getting into the kind of territory where the Agnew precedent becomes very relevant, where the issue of the president's potential indictability, potential prosecutability are maybe treated as separate matters. Maybe the president can't be prosecuted now under Justice Department policy, but maybe that's a separate issue from whether or not the president can be indicted. And if the president can be indicted, is the president allowed to essentially negotiate with prosecutors over his own fate? as it balances against those potential criminal charges. If that is the part we are getting to, then this is also the part of American history where the character and the independence of the U.S. Justice Department becomes the most important thing we may ever need to know about this moment in American history. I mean, just think about this from the big picture, right? Think about this like it's 50 years from now and your grandkids or great-grandkids are looking back at this time in history, right? If we are living through a moment in which there is an active criminal in the White House, somebody who's committing felonies while serving as president of the United States, if we are living through in a moment in American history where there is a criminal in the White House, but the Justice Department and our system of law enforcement and oversight has integrity and is independent and acts the way it is supposed to when confronted with bad actors like this, then the history of this moment is the fact that there's a criminal in the White House. And it becomes an interesting story in American history about that criminal in the White House. But on the other hand, if there is a criminal in the White House, if there is somebody who is serving as president of the United States and committing felonies while holding that job, and our Justice Department and our system of law enforcement and oversight doesn't have integrity and isn't independent and goes along with it and helps to cover up those crimes, helps to make it okay that those crimes were committed simply because the criminal held a high office when he did it, well, in that case, that means this moment in history is not just about there being a criminal in the White House. That will mean we have a real problem as a country that is going to be harder to fix than if this is just a problem with one bad guy.